Johor's property market has shown resilient growth in recent times. To discuss Johor's property market and outlook in more detail, please welcome Mr. Keith HY Ooi from Knight Frank, Malaysia.
All right, thank you, MC. A very good morning, everyone, to the delegates as well as all the participants of this Invest Malaysia event. So today I see a very large crowd, and there are some common faces and property players as well in the room. So, and I was told that I'm standing in between of the time, of the arrival of our Prime Minister and as well as the break. So I have about 45 slides here today, and I'll just briefly run through this as quick as possible so that I would not delay any timing on this, right? So let's firstly go through what is, the current dynamics and future prospect of Johor property market. Can I just ask the crowd here today, right? Do you think Malaysia is a good investment destination? Can I have a hand? Well done, right. And is Johor a good destination for investment? Indeed, all right. So let me just go through this quickly in terms of the slides that I've prepared. Basically, a general property market outlook overview of the Malaysian market, and then I'll go through the industrial, that's been the darling sector of Malaysia. Then, of course, data center market. I wouldn't why through in terms of the technicality of data center as Daddy, the earlier speaker have actually gone through, right? So I'm just going through on a very brief basis on how data center resulted in the real estate impact on the land side, all right? And then I'll quickly go through on the high-rise residential market, commercial market, and lastly, the future prospect of emerging trend, all right? So let's go through this. All right, so in terms of the general property market of Malaysia, all right, based on the data that we have observed, basically property transactions have grew about 8%, all right, year on year, as opposed to 2023 first half. And the value transaction is way higher at close to about 24% higher. So what does that mean, all right? So basically, we have lower transactions, but way higher value. So that results to a average transaction per value is higher. So it is indeed a very, very good sign for the national real estate data transaction. We have more higher value transaction happening over the year. Right, so if you can look at the chart on the first half of 2020, of course, that is the deep of where COVID happens, right? And then if you look at the first half, of 2023, you'll be able to see the transaction have actually increased tremendously, right? And in terms of the line on the yellow line, that if you could see, that is actually Johor transaction volume as well as value. All right? So let's move on to Johor as on the decade volume transaction. If we can see in 4 of the sector chart that we have actually provided, basically all of the transaction has peaked in 2014, right? So if you look at the whole 10-year trend, basically the volume and the value have actually hovers around the average mark. And then, of course, in the first half of 2020, the COVID happens, and then majority of the of the transaction and value have actually dipped. All right, and then if you look at the first half of 2023, and majority of this transaction have actually surpassed the cycle of the last previous years, and so this indicates basically the vibrancy of the property market in Johor in particular, right? So residential, commercial, if you look at industrial, industrial has been the darling of the sector. We will actually dwell into it a little bit further later. And then we have, of course, development land as well, right? So moving on, for this particular chart, you will probably notice that Johor Bahru has been still the primary district for majority of the existing supply happening in Johor. And then, of course, it follows through with Kluang and Batu Pahat as well. So on the Johor Bahru front, there's a CAGR of about 4.7% growth over the last 10 years. All right, so moving on quickly on the Johor top 5 district of transacted value and land use distribution. If you look at the entire Johor map itself, it is indeed Johor Bahru still stands as the primary focus of majority of the developers, right? So out of the 3 billion mark property transaction value has happened, majority of the transaction are actually from the industrial land transaction. That covers about 61% of the total transaction of 3 billion total transaction happens in Johor Bahru itself. And then, and you could probably see from the site is that Muar and Batu Pahat will have mostly on the residential land side of things, right? All right, so industrial market, where do we stand, right? Where do we stand in the overall sector in terms of property sector in Malaysia itself? So industrial, we have put it right in front, is basically the darling of the entire property sector, and this is the focus growth of the Malaysian property market. Right, so let's move on to this. These are some announcements that we have gathered, basically in terms of the Johor activities. So there are still a lot of activities happening in the Johor region. So a bit of fun facts. Do we know that actually PTP is one of the busiest port in the world, as well as the 5th most efficient port in the world? So no doubt that the fact is that PTP will continue developing logistic and port sector. So these are some of the interesting news that has happened over the years. And of course, furthermore, what we have actually noticed is the industrial trend are actually going in terms of green industrial transformation, right? So a lot of the operators as well as the players in the industrial sector is actually shifting towards the renewable energy and the technological advancement sector, right? Right, so, all right, so this is basically an investment that is coming into Johor itself, and out of which, based on the data itself, we have seen that 70% of the investment has been realized, right? So, and the focus of the industry moving forward will definitely be a higher value, innovative driven sector, which is more towards E&E, aerospace, medical, EV, green energy, as well as solar farming and green activities. So it is indeed a very ESG-driven sector that we could see that majority of the players in the market are actually embracing into. Right, so let's move on then to some of the data of industrial Johor Bahru as well as Kulai. So if you look at the total volume of the Johor and Johor Bahru plus Kulai accommodates close to about 78% of the total volume happening in Johor and about 87% of the total value. So the focus are still primarily in the district of Johor Bahru as well as Kulai. All right, so data center. So as I mentioned earlier, I won't actually go into detail of data center as Daddy have actually went through, in terms of it. So at a glance, so what is happening to the Malaysian data center landscape? Prior to 2021, there's only a handful of operators RE. Right on your right today, look at the volume of the operators have actually committed and have invested in the country of Malaysia. All right? So this is based on nationwide. So let's quickly move on to some notable data centers investment that in recent years that is happening in the region of Johor. Right? So we have, of course, the Sedenak Tech Park and the YTL Johor Green DC Park, Nusa Jaya, Kempas Tech Park, Nusa Cemerlang Industrial Park, SLLC, as well as other places. So these are major players, major global players are actually committed and entering into our investment landscape, right? So, why is Johor being an emerging data center? I think as what, Daddy have actually, earlier mentioned that, one of the primary, I would say, factor is basically the Singapore factor, right? Once they close the gate, the majority of the investment have actually flowed in, all right? So Johor, being geographically, location-wise, as we strategic, and of course we have ample of land, a talent pool, and this have actually driven the majority of the DC investment into Malaysia as well as primary in Johor. Right, so what does data center have resulted in the real estate landscape, right? So basically what we are trying to show in this chart here is that majority of the data center operators who actually came in to invest in Malaysia are via the greenfield route, right? So this has actually, over the years, have actually commanded a lot of premium in terms of industrial land. So DC operators do invest, and developers and local developers have actually managed to sell majority of the land at the premium prices to DC operators. Of course, having said so, the premium prices that the DC players have actually paid for are also a lot to do for the developers to ensure that the land are actually converted, and a lot of infra and cost needs to be sunk in before the transaction happens, right? So it's just several examples that we have actually put on here. There are transactions of certain acquisition price and selling price after a year or two, that equates to about close to about 3 to 5 times of what has been. So it is indeed a very, very lucrative market for most of the developers in this region, all right? So the biggest challenge of this is then that will also result to a lot of local developers are trying to jump into the bandwagon, right? Not noting the fact that majority of the lands that they own, or indeed I would say a smaller developers who owns, will probably try to flip it on to DC operators, but not necessarily every single land is actually suitable for DC facilities, right? So let's quickly move on to the high-rise residential market overview. We have actually excluded landed properties in this presentation because as far as our data are concerned, actually landed properties in Johor is doing fairly well, right? So, let's move on to this. Basically, the existing supply and future supply of high-rise residential in Johor. So, the current cumulative supply or existing supply in Johor are still dominated by the service apartment sector, right? And then followed by the condominium apartments sector, and then on the more limited way on the Soho / commercial development, right? So you will see on the future supply, incoming supply as well, in terms of service apartment, also do dominates the majority of the supply coming into the region today, right? So we have close to about incoming about 2,240 units, service apartment commands about close to about 19,000 units into the market. And there are close to about 28,000 planned supply coming into the near future, right? All right, this is basically the volume and value of high-rise residential transaction. What we want to show is the breakdown of value as well as the value and volume of the transaction on the first half of 2024. So similarly, I think if you look at the blue chart on the side, service apartment dominates about close to 63% of the entire transaction volume as well as value. That amounts to about close to about 1.59 billion, and followed through by condo and apartment, about close to about 630 million, and Soho, SOFO, and SOVO, close to about 3 million ringgit, right? Right, so let's look at what particular type are actually in demand, right? So if you look at the condominium apartment section, on which price value that the sector is actually going, right? So majority, if you look at the share of the transaction, majority of the prices are priced below 600,000, right? So similarly, it happens to the service apartment sector as well. Majority based on the transaction volume and the data that we have, close to about 60% share back in 2023, and of course in the first half of 2024 it hovers down to close to about 54%, right? Right, so let's address the elephant in the room, right? Residential overhang, right? This has been a topic of discussion for a lot over the years, right? So basically, if you look at Johor, historically, if you look at it, I think majority of the overhang numbers, data are actually contributed and coming from the region of Johor. Right. So let's look at it, look through it, and what this indicates is that if you look at the line chart of things, right, we are probably heading on the right track. So over time, over the last 3 years, I would say, the volume of overhang properties in the region of Johor are actually declining, right? So it is indeed a good sign, but whether is that good enough, this is something the authorities and to actually look at, and what contributes to this overhang, right? Basically, it's all about demand supply. So over the course of the year, we have also engaged with our several authorities to ensure that the primary reason for this is that we need a live transaction data happening in the market, right? In order to have that, basically, every single one of us in this room, be it a consultant, be it a developer, you are able to analyze exactly what is the existing supply, what are the incoming supply, and then you do the financial projection yourself and to ensure that whatever pricing that you have actually marked on your development, it will be able to sell, right? So looking at the high-rise residential property overhang, the type and the price as well, of course, as we said, above 800,000 contributes about close to half, about 50% share of majority of the overhang numbers. All right, so infrastructure. It is indeed very, very interesting how RTS as a game changer in our property market industry, in particular Johor, have actually benefited the property market sector itself. So we have actually plotted out a graph, a map chart of where RTS is located, and then a legend within the radius of 1 kilometer and 1.5 kilometer, right? So the existing supply within the 1.5 kilometer radius accounts for about close to about 13,000 units, right? And future incoming supply will be close to about 15,000 units. So, and you can see, in the legend, these are the developments have actually mushroomed up, have actually been committed and built within the RTS, line, right? So how does this benefit them? Moving on. So it has created a renewed interest in the property buying residential landscape, right? So we have also noted over the year, in 2024 itself, we have seen announcement of sales happening over time when RTS has been announced, right? Majority of the whole and wait scenario back in 2022, and now buyers, be it local or be it on the Singaporean side of things, are actually realizing their investment mandates, right? So a lot of, and these have also created, an asking price, selling price way above 1,000 ringgit a square foot, right? So these are some of the announcements that we have actually picked up over the announcement of the press, and majority of this has been achieved a very, very optimistic sales rate, all right? Okay, let's head on to commercial market. How do we fare? right? So in terms of PBOs, purpose-built offices, right? Overall, if you look at the green chart, it is quite worrying, close to about 51% occupancy. That's average across all grades offices. And then, of course, the incoming supply of existing stocks are actually coming in, right? So, but what we observe in the market is that purpose-built grade A offices are in demand, all right? So we have been engaging with our Singaporean counterparts, and we have seen and we have received tremendous inquiries relating to offices of good grade offices that financial institutions who are based, headquartered in Singapore, as well as multinational, are looking at Johor as an alternative destination to house their back of house as well as their shared services divisions, right? Why? Simple reason. Cost effective, right? As far as the data are concerned, we are close to only about 15-30% of the rental in Singapore prime offices. Right? So, recent notable tenant movement, of course, Knight Frank is there. We did also move to a way better building, right? So, all these movements we have seen in the market are basically due to flight to quality, right? What we need is a quality office buildings that actually promotes ESGs, promote efficiency to all operators and tenants. Right, so I've touched a bit on this earlier, so you could actually see the chart that where we are on the yellow line, way below the graph, right? As opposed to what Singapore suburban as well as Singapore grade A offices are commanding, right? So, no-brainers. This is the main reason of a cost-effective alternative for Singaporean offices to actually get their back of houses, their shared services to operate in Johor, right? So, of course, the biggest challenge and the factor that we need to do is definitely to ensure the connectivity are all in. Good. All right, so I think I'm running out of time. Let's quickly move on in terms of retail occupancy rates, covering about 71% in JB. Is still, the outlook for this is that good malls as well as diversified tenant mix mall are doing well in Johor, all right? So there are some news in terms of reviving abandoned malls in Johor. So a good initiative from the local government and the state government to ensure that all this is revived, to ensure they are brought to a level where majority of the consumers are actually looking for, right? So, future prospect, all right? Quickly, what is the difference now, all right? Singapore strong currency exchange. This benefits us, right? Because majority of the workers, Malaysian workers who actually work abroad will have a higher disposable income, right? So, of course, busiest causeway in the world, actually, right? Of more than about 300,000 Malaysians traveling across daily, right? Rising costs is one of the other factors as well in Singapore themselves, and then that's where the alternative destination of Malaysia or Johor will be looked at, right? And of course, the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone is an initiative that everyone is looking at, and SFZ is where recently incentive tax breaks and whatever for family offices has been announced. This is something to look out for. And of course, the progress of the RTS link. All right? Oh, sorry.
Mr.
Okay,
Ooi,
so...
apologies, Mr. Ooi. In the interest of time, can I please ask you to wrap up with your final
all right,
thoughts?
okay. All right. So I'll just quickly go through this, all right? Basically, we could actually share this over to everyone. The alternative emerging sector that we have seen today is basically healthcare is one of the sectors that we actually look at. Education is a big prospect. And of course, in terms of education as well as senior living residences, all right? Due to the aging population we have, this is what we are looking at. So the Johor outlook, I've mentioned, we are optimistic, all right, on the overall prospect of Johor moving forward. So critical success for Johor Singapore SEZ, all right, investor friendly, all right, infrastructure, disbursement of where RTS is very, very important, crucial for us, and of course, incentivize development incorporating ESG initiative, all right? So, Johor, a decade of transformation and a lifetime of potential. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ooi, for that informative session.